Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we plunge into the heart of big ideas. Our goal, helping you get truly well-informed without feeling overwhelmed. Today, we're tackling a concept that's, well, it's echoed through history: liberty, equality, fraternity. But we're zooming in on equality. What is it, really? It sounds simple, maybe even obvious, but as our sources show, it's actually way more complex, often misunderstood.
That's absolutely right. And our mission today is to, unpack a really fascinating set of sources. We'll explore what equality truly means, how the idea has evolved over time, and we'll look at its relationship, sometimes smooth, sometimes pretty rocky, with liberty and justice. Well, we'll cover a lot of ground.
And we promise this won't be a dry academic lecture. We're here to guide you, cut through the noise, expect some of those aha moments, maybe some surprising facts, so you can really grasp this critical idea. Ready to jump in?
Let's do it.
Okay, so most of us link liberty and equality together, right? Like they're two sides of the same coin. But our sources, they start by pointing out it's not always that simple. Historically, the idea of equality has shifted quite dramatically.
Yeah, dramatically is the word. If you go way back, you have someone like Aristotle. Yeah. His view of justice, it was about treating equals equally and unequals unequally, which, essentially just locked in the existing social order, master and slave, rich and poor. Those divisions were seen as, well, natural, fixed.
Which is such a stark contrast to how we tend to think about equality now, because the modern idea isn't about keeping hierarchies. It's about actively trying to reduce inequalities, specifically the ones we, as a society, see as unjust. And here's a key point, something that often trips people up. Equality, in this modern sense, isn't really a statement of fact.
Exactly. It's not saying all people are identical in skills or looks or anything like that. The claim is that they must be treated as equals. And the reasoning behind that, it varies. Maybe it's because we're all rational beings. Maybe we're endowed with reason, maybe created equal by God. Or maybe it's just that our basic human needs, physical, emotional, intellectual, are similar enough to warrant equal rights, even if our talents differ.
Right. But then you always get that counter argument, don't you? Nature itself makes everything unequal. Mountains, valleys, strong animals, weak animals. So why fight what seems like the natural order of things?
And, well, historically, that argument has been pretty useful for people wanting to hang on to their privileges. They often see equality as a threat, something that might diminish their own status or achievements. They worry it undermines the very liberty that let them get ahead in the first place.
It's almost like saying, my freedom to succeed depends on others not having the same chance. It twists the idea of liberty.
It really can. R.H. Tawney put it brilliantly. He said, freedom for the pike is death for the minnows. It shows how unchecked liberty, without considering equality, just lets the strong crush the weak. So introducing equality isn't about destroying liberty. It's about making liberty more meaningful for everyone. It's about restricting that kind of exploitation, spreading the benefits more widely so they're not just for a few.
That makes a lot of sense. So if equality today is about fixing unjust inequalities, it implies this modern concept is relatively new.
Oh, absolutely. As Tom Bodway pointed out, for most of human history, social inequality was just accepted, an unchangeable fact, often backed up by religious beliefs,
Right.
Like traditional thinking saw the social order as fixed, like the seasons changing. Everyone had their place.
But then science started to change things. The Enlightenment. People began applying reason not just to nature, but to society itself. How did that change the conversation?
It sparked two really big questions for social thinkers. First, how much of the inequality we see is actually down to social arrangements? Stuff we created and so stuff we can change. And second, if these inequalities are changeable, can they actually be defended by reason? Are they fair? The goal became trying to identify and remove those inequalities that were both unreasonable and possible to fix.
And this thinking led to that crucial distinction Rousseau made, right, between natural and conventional inequality.
Exactly. Natural inequality, age, health, maybe raw intelligence, things largely outside our control back then, versus conventional inequality, privileges, wealth, power, stuff created by human agreement or force. Realizing that conventional inequality is man-made, that was revolutionary. It opened the door to rethinking social structures completely. It directly fueled things like the French Declaration of the Rights of Man and the Citizen in 1789. Remember that line? Men are born and remain free and equal in rights. Social distinctions can be based only upon public utility. Powerful stuff.
And here's something really fascinating, bringing it to today. Science keeps advancing. Things once seen as purely natural inequality, like health outcomes, maybe even some mental traits, appearance, we're finding ways to alter them. What does that imply?
It implies that more and more deprivation looks like it's caused by social factors, by unequal access or opportunity, not just by fate or nature, which reinforces the idea that demanding equality is fundamentally a demand for social change. It's about fixing unjust parts of the system. John Rees nailed it. It is when men see certain inequalities as unjust and alterable that equality as an ideal becomes a potent force in political life.
Okay, so let's be really clear for everyone listening. Our sources stress. This isn't about making everyone literally identical. It's about reducing unreasonable inequality. Some differences are accepted, right? Like the different physical demands of childbirth or a teacher having authority over a student.
Absolutely. Those are usually seen as based on rational grounds or unalterable facts. Inequality only becomes a problem, a grievance, when it's seen as unjust and changeable. So if equality doesn't mean identical treatment, it has to allow for some kinds of discrimination, provided they're based on rational grounds, grounds that fit our sort of modern sense of fairness.
Okay, so what are those rational grounds? Our sources point to two main ones. First, special provision in case of need. Think about progressive taxes. People earning less pay a smaller percentage, or none at all, because they need that money just to get by. Higher earners contribute more. It's unequal treatment, but based on need.
Right. And you see it in public services, too. Subsidized transport, schools, hospitals, often used more by people who pay less in taxes towards them. Why? Because the service is based on need, not just ability to pay. This is also the underlying principle for things like job reservations or support for disadvantaged groups, women, people with disabilities, specific castes or tribes in India. It's about addressing need, giving a boost to those starting behind.
Makes sense. And the second rational ground, special rewards for excellence. This tackles that common criticism that equality is just about dragging everyone down, a philosophy of poverty that kills ambition and art.
Yeah, but a rational view of equality doesn't buy that. It absolutely values excellence. But, and this is crucial, it prioritizes it after basic needs are mostly met for everyone. And crucially, when those special talents actually benefit society as a whole, the classic example is an orchestra. You give the best violins to the best players, right? Not the beginners. Why? So everyone listening gets the best possible music. It's different from a pure market view that just celebrates profit without asking who benefits from that profit.
Okay, but this idea of making special provisions, even for rational reasons like need or societal benefit, leads us straight into a really difficult area. Reverse discrimination, or affirmative action, especially debated in the U.S. regarding Black Americans and women.
It's definitely complex. The arguments for it often focus on compensation for historical disadvantage, like trying to make up for past wrongs. Or they focus on achieving real equality, maybe needing more Black doctors or female engineers to better serve those communities. And there's the argument that scarce opportunities, like university places, should perhaps consider need alongside pure merit to build a fairer society overall.
But the arguments against are strong, too. Critics say equality should just mean equality of opportunity. Everyone starts the race fairly, but outcomes aren't guaranteed. They worry that affirmative action undermines respect for individual achievement, for merit, and they raise that issue of procedural justice. Is the process fair? Like, could a wealthier person from a targeted group get preference over a poorer person from a non-targeted group? That feels unfair to some.
And then there's the argument, why should the current generation pay for the sins of past generations?
Yeah.
Plus, the concern that preferential treatment might actually harm someone's self-respect, making them wonder if they got the position based on merit or just preference. It's a real tangle.
It absolutely is. Now, in India, the debate seems a bit different, maybe less polarized because there's broad agreement on helping deprived groups. But they have this big practical issue with the creamy layer, right? Where the better off within those disadvantaged groups tend to capture most of the benefits.
Exactly. And the Indian Supreme Court has actually stepped in on that. They've ruled that this creamy layer should be excluded from reservation benefits. They've also generally capped total reservations at 50% to avoid what they see as excessive reverse discrimination. It shows they're trying to find a balance, proceeding with caution.
Okay, with all those complexities in mind, let's shift perspective slightly. Let's look at equality through different dimensions: legal, political, and socioeconomic.
Good idea. Starting with legal equality, this was really the first big demand. Equal status for everyone before the law. Rousseau captured it well. He said laws make people equal by convention and legal right, even if they're unequal in strength or smarts. It's about everyone mattering equally in the eyes of the law.
And it's easy to forget how hard won this was. Our sources remind us slaves had no legal standing in England until 1772. People getting poor relief couldn't vote until 1918. Married women couldn't own property until 1870. All women couldn't vote until 1918. It's actually quite recent history.
It really is.
Yeah.
So legal equality means, as J.R. Lucas described it, equal subjection of all citizens to the law and equal protection of the laws for all citizens. Everyone can use the courts, everyone has to answer to them, no exceptions based on rank.
But, and this is a big but, in societies with huge gaps between rich and poor, like India, just having legal equality on paper isn't always enough, is it? Harold Lasky pointed out that money becomes a huge factor. The best lawyers tend to work for the rich.
Right. And Lucas adds, justice is not served if the case of one party is incompetently prevented and that of the other superbly well by the best barrister that money can buy. There's also the subtle issue that judges, often coming from wealthier backgrounds, might unconsciously lean towards protecting property interests. So legal equality is vital, foundational even, but it really needs socioeconomic changes to work effectively for everyone.
Okay, then there's political equality, usually summed up as one person, one vote, equal right to run for office, no special privileges for certain classes, the idea that everyone's capable of political judgment.
Yeah, this emerged alongside legal equality, think French Revolution again. It led to universal suffrage, democratic rights in the West. It felt like a massive step forward.
But even early on, thinkers like Alexis de Tocqueville saw a potential problem. He was incredibly insightful. He noticed the gap between this new political equality and the persistent economic inequality. And he predicted basically that people wouldn't put up with that forever. He foresaw a clash between the haves and have-nots, pushing toward socialist ideas. He saw the tension brewing.
And that leads us perfectly into socioeconomic equality.
Yeah.
This is arguably the most substantive type, the one that really drives social change. It's the core aim of socialism, but it was later picked up by positive liberal theory too, the idea that the state should actively step in to improve welfare and reduce inequality. As Ben and Peters put it, without some level of socioeconomic equality, political equality is an illusion.
And you can see why, right, if wealth equals political influence, if the legal system is too expensive for the poor, if, as Tawny said, owning property gives you control over other people's lives, then political rights alone don't guarantee real freedom or equality.
Exactly. Now, socioeconomic equality doesn't necessarily mean everyone gets the exact same slice of the pie. It's not about literal identical shares. It's more about reducing the big gaps, progressively extending benefits, education, healthcare, social safety nets to the less well-off. It's about moving from just formal rights on paper to actual substantive equality in people's lives.
This is where you get ideas like Marx's from each according to his ability to each according to his need for communism, or maybe to each according to his work under socialism, different formulas for distribution.
Right. But broadly, socioeconomic equality means the state taking responsibility for things like education, job support, essential services, minimum wages, pensions. Often funded through progressive taxes, those with more capacity pay more to provide support based on need. That's the essence of the welfare state model, though of course Marxists argued for a complete overhaul of the system, while liberals tend to favor gradual adjustments.
Okay, this brings us to maybe the most debated area, the relationship between liberty and equality. Are they allies, enemies? Sometimes both. Our sources show really different takes on this.
They really do. First, you have the complementary view. The argument here is pretty logical. If my freedom allows me to destroy your freedom, think of the powerful crushing the weak, the rich exploiting the poor, then freedom isn't really a universal principle, is it? Property, in this view, can easily become a tool for exploitation. So massive socioeconomic gaps are seen as fundamentally incompatible with genuine freedom for everyone. Thinkers like Connie, Pravoski, McPherson really champion this idea: equality enables liberty for more people.
But then there's the contradictory view, seeing them often in conflict. Tocqueville worried again here. He feared that the push for equality by leveling social differences could lead to a kind of bland conformity, a tyranny of the majority that would actually squash individual freedom and dissent.
Yeah, and Lord Acton echoed that. He thought equality threatened liberty by weakening independent sources of power like churches or local communities and concentrating power in the state. Their solutions often involve things like decentralization, strong local government, a free press, ways to protect individual spaces from the majority. And of course, John Stuart Mill fiercely defended the individual against the masses, arguing society has no right to silence even one dissenting voice.
You see this clash in economics too. Isaiah Berlin, for example, argued the state's job is just to protect negative liberty, simply being free from interference by others. If you're too poor to buy bread, Berlin argued, your political liberty isn't violated. That's just, well, unfortunate circumstance, not oppression by the state. What does that imply?
Well, critics in our sources say Berlin basically treats socioeconomic inequalities like they're natural, unchangeable facts, like the weather. They argue that separating liberty from equality like this actually harms liberty itself, because those inequalities are often changeable products of society, and ignoring them means ignoring real constraints on people's freedom.
And F.A. Hayek took this even further, didn't he? He argued that if you have equality before the law, people's different talents will lead to unequal outcomes in wealth. And trying to force economic equality through state power would inevitably destroy freedom, leading to authoritarianism.
Hayek saw freedom primarily as a tool for progress, driven by the achievements of a talented few. He famously called social justice a mirage, a dangerous illusion. But again, the counter-argument in our sources is powerful. Separating liberty from social justice, ignoring deep inequalities, actually undermines the very foundations of a free society for everyone.
This philosophical split ties directly into how we think about justice itself.
Let's go back to Aristotle again. Justice consists in treating equals equally and unequals unequally. But he also warned that if people who are equal in one way demand equality in all ways, you could get rebellion.
And our sources suggest that modern thinkers like Hayek are, in a way, echoing Aristotle to defend the current system, saying social justice is a dangerous idea, that mirage.
Right. This leads us to libertarianism, the view associated with Hayek. It generally supports a system where capable individuals shouldn't be obstructed. It's not overly concerned with poverty elsewhere, and it argues against using taxes for welfare. It focuses on procedural justice. If the rules of the game are fair, whatever outcome results is considered just, even if it's highly unequal.
But the opposing view is egalitarianism, perhaps best represented by someone like John Rawls.
Yes, egalitarians start from the opposite assumption. Equality is the baseline, the default that's just. Therefore, it's inequalities that need strong justification. They push for substantive justice, meaning justice isn't just about fair rules, but about actually improving the conditions of the worst off. This often requires quite radical changes in how society distributes benefits and burdens. They criticize libertarians for prioritizing an abstract liberty over the concrete needs of the vulnerable.
L.T. Hobhouse summed up that tension so well. Justice is a name to which every knee will bow. Equality is a word which many fear and detest. Really hits home, doesn't it?
It really does. I think the central takeaway from our sources is that both liberty and equality are fundamental for a truly just society. Most of the conflict comes from, well, biased interpretations, often interpretations that serve specific interests rather than universal principles.
Yeah, it seems clear from our deep dive that legal and political equality are pretty compatible with liberty, maybe even necessary for it. But the socioeconomic dimension, that's where it gets really tangled. And as Lasky noted, historically, the fight for liberty often leaned on the idea of equality. Because let's face it, huge inequality often means some people's freedom is built on restricting the freedom of others.
Absolutely. And it's crucial to remember what kind of equality we're usually talking about. True equality, in the modern sense, aims for equality of opportunity, for fair shares, maybe a basic minimum for all. It's generally not about demanding identical treatment or equal shares of everything, particularly economically. Our sources warn against pushing pure competition arguments too far, ignoring human needs and social bonds. That path, they suggest, leads to disastrous conclusions for humanity.
So a final thought for you, our listener. After exploring all these complex ideas, these historical shifts, these different interpretations, what kind of equality do you believe is most important for a just society? And what does your answer imply for the kind of world we're trying to build together?